Have you ever seen a word that you're like, oh, I know what that is, but you just didn't know how to pronounce it? Well, that is this for me right here. I played this game since 2011. I've been in Shelmont since then, but I never knew the pronunciation. But we're going to go with my general rule of thumb of saying what's the easiest to say, and we're just going to call this Conch. So, let's get started. What we're going to talk about today is Conch armor sets. Now, they come in 3 different types. You got Pathfinder for Rangers and Rogues, Magus for Mages and Druids, and you got Vanquisher for Warriors. The armor itself was put in the game Christmas 2011, and it's been a part of it ever since. The bosses were never removed, but they're also not part of Legacy, so they don't, spawn according to those times. In my estimation, it spawns less often in Legacy. I don't know because I'm not here 24/7, but I have a fairly good knowledge on the selling of conch armor, and I think it's pretty accurate to say that. So let's look into the armor sets themselves. So I got my Pathfinder here. Now the first thing you notice, if you look at this ranger here and me, what do you see? Well, my gloves and boots are neon yellow. I never understood that, but it's been like that since, the dawn of conch armor in 2011. It has always been neon yellow, and I never solved the mystery. I don't think I ever will, but let's look past that. When we look at the stats of the armor itself, you notice something. All of the parts give the same types of stats: pierce damage, armor, resist crush, defense. They all require 60 dexterity. And that lets you know, you're getting all that per piece. Know exactly what you're getting. So, people would pay a lot of money for these sets. Back in the day, like $1 million. Now, probably like $2 million. I don't think I could find a set if I looked. But people would mainly buy them back then just for the BP in the pants because of the pierce damage. And from my other videos that pierce damage is OP because it gives more damage than it says. But I don't necessarily agree with buying the armor for that. But we'll move on from that. Back in the day, you'd always see people running around looking like this. It was pretty comical, because if you saw somebody wearing all this, you knew they were loaded, they were rich, they could take on the whole world. It doesn't matter if they're a level 30 or level 20 or even a level 10, they're ready for anything. Just nice memories, and I'm pretty sure some of the oldies out there will know what I'm talking about. Well then, let's move on to the next set. Now, we're going to talk about Magus armor, the mage and druid stuff. So, as you can see, it looks just like these guys, but it also has these neon gloves and boots. Also, beards clip through the masks, so keep that in mind if you're making an alt. Now, this armor has magic damage, armor, resist magic, and health. It has a focus requirement of 60. It was also another popular choice. Now let's take a look at the last set of armor. The last set of armor we're going to talk about is Vanquisher. Now, I had to borrow a picture because I sold my Vanquisher set a long time ago, but it has all the information we need. So at first glance, it looks just like Conch Warrior, but with those neon gloves and boots. Vanquisher was the only set to have an offhand, the shield, and you can see its stats here. Now the shield's interesting because there's not that many shields that actually give you damage. None give it outright except for DL and EDL for Divine, and some shields give strength, but that's it. And the armor itself gives you crush damage, armor, resist pierce, and attack. And all of the pieces have a VIT requirement of 60. So, with all those sets aside, now we're going to talk about the bosses themselves. Personally, I don't have any pictures of the bosses, so I had to borrow a few. Now these bosses are basically just supersized conch soldiers, but OP, really OP. If you thought Astrazol the Invincible was hard, you didn't see nothing. Now these bosses come in different levels and classes. You got Magus armor for this 80 and 70. You got Vanquisher armor for this 70 and 80. And this 70 drops Pathfinder. Now there might be an 80 Pathfinder dropper. I never seen it. All the conch bosses I ever fought would only drop one piece of armor. And usually it was the gloves or the boots. If you were lucky, you got, a helm, BP, or pants. Shields were probably the rarest thing to get, because there's a 1/6 chance. Well, actually lower than that, because the shield was harder to get than gloves, but you get my point. These bosses spawn all over the map, but they're generally centered around the middle, with a few outliers, like this guy here. And they usually took a few people to kill. I tried to solo a 70 ranger with Furyion one time, and I barely got it. Some guy actually saved it for me, because I died and I had a laystone. But luckily, some of these are by the laystone, so you could cheat them out a bit. Now let's compare all the gear and see how they match up. For comparing all this armor, I grabbed the stats of all the BPs from the database, and we can use that to compare them all and see what they're good for and how they compare to each other. So all of these have 2 damage. Magus has 2 magic, Pathfinder has 2 pierce, and Vanquisher has 2 crush. Obviously we could see here that the Magus is the worst for this because magic damage does not scale with strength or ability. We can also see that they're each about 20 armor apart. And we can see that Pathfinder's for 2 classes, Magus is for 2 classes, and Vanquisher's just for Warrior. So it may be hard to sell. Magus has resist magic, Pathfinder's resist crush, and Vanquisher has resist pierce. Resist crush is the worst out of these probably. Not so much for PvP, but in general. These also weigh different amounts. Magus is the lightest at 10, but that's still heavy for a caster. Pathfinder's 20 and Vanquisher's 30. And Vanquisher has 40 attack, Pathfinder has 40 defense, while Magus has 60 health. Now that's really good. Now let's look at the stats here. I threw the starting stats of a level 1 there, just for a comparison with what I'm about to talk about. You see they all have a requirement of 60. 60 dex for Pathfinder, 60 focus for Magus, and 60 vit for Vanquisher. And you can see that focus you start with 10, vit you start with 10, and dexterity you start with 5. Well, how is this going to affect anything? Well, every level after 1, you get 5 stat points. So, these have different level requirements if you fully invest in that stat. For Pathfinder, if you leveled up to 12, you'd be able to wear it if you invested all in Dex. But for Magus and Vanquisher, since you have 10 to start with, you only need level 11. May make a difference, may not. Good for PvP minded people. And another thing I want to talk about. Looking at all these stats, the main draw for Pathfinder and Vanquisher is the Pierce and Crush damage. But look at their requirements. For Pathfinder, you need Dex to gain your Pierce damage. That's a red flag, because Pierce damage scales with Strength. So why would you invest in a different stat for your armor, which only gives 2 Pierce? I don't know. You can just wear Solstice and you'll be fine, and you'll be able to invest in Strength and be able to use something useful like a Winter King weapon or something. As for Vanquisher, it's better because, Vit is something you're going to use anyway in a PvP build, but Vit's not going to help your crush damage. In addition to that, if you're going to be using some armor that's effective, it's not going to be Vanquisher because Vanquisher has 0 resist on it. You'd be using Ancient Plate or something along those lines, or even Solstice if you're going for damage. Now Magus is actually good. When you're playing a major druid, you're going to be using focus anyway to make your spells more effective. And in addition to that, it gives you health too. So you're getting Vit out of your focus. And just being OP. The magic damage is trash, but we're not talking about that. We just want the health out of the armor. So I highly suggest Magus armor for any PvP builds around level 10. The other armors, I don't like. They look cool, but they're not good stat-wise. So the main thing I'm trying to say here is Magus armor's OP. Get it if you can. The other ones are mainly just for show. That's basically my opinion on the armor sets. They're a pretty cool piece of history too, since the rich people in 2011, 2012 would always run around with them, and it was usually viewed as a high-end item, luxury. Nowadays, you don't really see people running around in it. Occasionally, I'll put on the set every now and then, but most worlds no. Well, I hope you liked my review on this. Gave you all the knowledge that I know about them. Let me know what you think.